before the heavens were sealed, before fire fell from the sky, before death itself was defied. One man stood between a fallen kingdom and the wrath of the divine. His name would be whispered in fear by kings and queens. His miracles would defy the laws of nature itself. His departure would shatter every understanding of mortality. Elijah, the man of fire, the man who rose to heaven. The land was dying. Israel, once the jewel of nations, once blessed beyond measure by the hand of God, now lay cursed by its own betrayal. The sun burned without mercy over fields that had forgotten what rain felt like. Rivers dried to cracked riverbeds of dust. Children cried from hunger their parents could not satisfy, and in their desperation, they prayed. But not to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They prayed to gods carved from stone and plated in gold, gods with names like Baal and Asherah, gods brought by foreign queens into their land, gods that could not hear, gods that could not save. In the palace of Samaria, King Ahab sat on his throne, weak and compromised. His wife, Queen Jezebel, was the true power. She had brought the worship of Baal and weaponized it. The altars of the Lord were torn down. The prophets of God were hunted and executed. In their place, Jezebel installed 450 prophets of Baal, feeding them from the royal treasury. Israel was no longer a nation of God. It was a nation of idols. But in the wilderness, something stirred. A figure emerged from the barren lands of Gilead, walking alone through the dust and thorns. He wore rough clothing woven from camel hair, held together by a leather belt. His face was carved by years of wind and sun, but it was his eyes that made people stop and stare. They burned, not with anger, but with certainty. His name was Elijah, son of no one, from nowhere. And when he walked, the earth seemed to recognize him. The people watched as he passed through villages, unable to decide whether to fear him or follow him. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. Men lowered their eyes when he passed, as if meeting his gaze might sear their souls. Women clutched their wooden idols tighter, as if the small figures could protect them from whatever this stranger carried. Some whispered that he had been touched by God in the wilderness, that he carried a message too terrible to speak aloud. Others said he was mad, driven insane by years of isolation in the wastelands. A few remembered the old stories, the ancient warnings about prophets who appeared in times of judgment. But Elijah did not stop to explain himself. He did not preach in the streets or call out warnings. He simply walked with unwavering purpose toward the palace. When he reached the gates of Samaria, the guards stepped forward, spears raised. But when Elijah looked at them, something in that gaze made them step aside without question. He walked through the courtyard, up the marble steps, and into the throne room itself, without permission, without announcement, without hesitation. Inside, King Ahab sat surrounded by courtiers and priests of Baal. Jezebel sat beside him, her eyes sharp and calculating. Ahab looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Who are you to enter uninvited?" Elijah did not bow. He did not kneel. He simply spoke. "As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there will be neither dew nor rain in these years, except by my word." The words fell like stones into water. Silence rippled through the throne room. Then Ahab laughed, nervously. "You dare curse Israel?" Elijah's expression did not change. "This is not a curse. It is judgment. Your wife has brought false gods into this land. You have allowed the altars of the Lord to be destroyed. The rain will not fall. The earth will die until you remember who your God is." He took a step forward. Jezebel rose, her voice cutting like a blade. "Seize him." But before the guards could move, Elijah turned and walked out. The door slammed shut behind him with a sound like thunder. And outside, the sun continued to blaze, indifferent, merciless, waiting. The drought began that very day, not gradually, immediately. The clouds that had been forming on the horizon vanished like smoke. The morning dew that usually covered the grass did not appear. The air itself changed, becoming thick and oppressive, as if the sky had sealed itself shut against the earth below. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The land withered like a dying man gasping for his last breath. Wells that had never run dry in living memory emptied one by one. Springs that had flowed for generations ceased. The ground cracked open in jagged lines, creating fissures deep enough to swallow a man's arm. Trees dropped their leaves early, trying to survive, but most simply died where they stood, their branches reaching toward a sky that offered nothing. Livestock began to die. First, the weakest animals, then even the strongest oxen and camels fell. Fields of grain turned brown and crumbled to dust at the slightest touch. Orchards produced no fruit. Vineyards produced no grapes. Beehives fell silent. The people began to starve, slowly at first, then rapidly. And in their hunger, in their desperation, some of them began to remember a name they had almost forgotten. Elijah, the strange prophet who had cursed the king. The man who had spoken judgment over Israel with such terrible certainty. But Elijah was nowhere to be found. God had spoken to him in the silence. "Leave this place. Go east and hide yourself by the brook Chariot. You will drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." Elijah obeyed. The brook Chariot was hidden deep in a ravine, far from any road. The water was clear and cold. Each morning, ravens came carrying bread and meat in their beaks. Elijah ate, drank from the brook, prayed, and waited. Months passed, but then the brook began to shrink. Day by day, the flow weakened until one morning, silence. The brook had dried up, and God spoke again. "Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon. I have commanded a widow there to provide for you." Elijah traveled north into foreign territory. When he reached Zarephath, he saw her near the city gate, a woman gathering sticks, thin to the point of frailty, preparing to die. "Please, bring me water," Elijah called out. As she walked away, he added, "And bring me bread also." The woman stopped. "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I do not have bread. I have only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am making a final meal for myself and my son, and then we will die." Elijah stepped closer, his voice firm. "Do not be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf for me and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain." There was something in his voice that went beyond confidence. It was authority. The widow made her choice. She went home, took the last of her flour and oil, baked a small loaf, and brought it to Elijah. Then she returned to her jar and stopped. There was flour inside. Day after day, the miracle continued. The jar never emptied. The jug never ran dry. In a city dying of famine, there was provision. Elijah stayed with the widow and her son. But then, tragedy struck. One afternoon, the boy became ill, a fever that did not break. By morning, his breathing had become shallow, labored, irregular. The widow held him in her arms, rocking, praying. And then, his chest stopped rising. He was gone. The widow's scream tore through the house. "What have you done to me, man of God? Did you come to punish me by taking my son?" Elijah felt desperation surge through him. "Give me your son." He took the boy's lifeless body and carried him upstairs, laid him gently on the bed, and closed the door. Alone with the dead child, Elijah stretched himself over the small body 3 times. And he cried out, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." Silence. Then, a flutter, faint, but there, a heartbeat. The boy's chest rose, his eyes opened, color returned to his cheeks. He was alive. Elijah carried him downstairs. The widow saw her son, alive, breathing, and took him from Elijah's arms, holding him so tightly that the boy laughed. "Now I know that you are a man of God," she whispered through tears. Years passed, 3 years. The drought continued. Israel grew weaker. Ahab grew more desperate. And then God spoke to Elijah once more. "Go, show yourself to Ahab. I will send rain on the land." When Ahab heard Elijah had returned, he came out to meet him, anger and fear twisting his face. "Is that you, troubler of Israel?" Elijah did not flinch. "I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal." Ahab nodded. Mount Carmel rose above the land like the spine of some ancient beast, its slopes covered in dry grass and twisted olive trees. It was a sacred place, a high place, where the air felt thinner and the sky felt closer to the earth. And on this day, it would become a battlefield between the divine and the demonic. Thousands gathered on the mountain, not just from Samaria, but from every corner of Israel. They came because the king had commanded it, yes, but also because they were desperate. Desperate for rain, desperate for answers, desperate to know if their suffering had any meaning at all, or if they would simply starve to death under the indifferent gaze of silent gods. On one side of the summit stood the prophets of Baal, 450 of them, dressed in their ceremonial robes, adorned with symbols of their god. They were confident men, well-fed even in the famine, powerful men who had the backing of the queen and the resources of the kingdom. They moved with practiced grace, their rituals honed through years of performance. On the other side stood Elijah, alone. The contrast was almost laughable, if it were not so deadly serious. Elijah stepped forward, his voice carrying like thunder. "How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." The people said nothing. "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. But Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls. Let Baal's prophets choose one and prepare it, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other. Then you call on your God, and I will call on the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." The people murmured. Then someone shouted, "What you say is good." The prophets of Baal went first. They prepared their bull and began to call on Baal. "O Baal, answer us!" They danced, shouted, worked themselves into a frenzy. Hours passed. Morning became midday, but nothing happened. At noon, Elijah mocked them. "Shout louder. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or traveling, or sleeping and must be awakened."
They screamed louder. Some cut themselves with knives, blood streaming down their bodies. Still nothing. The afternoon wore on. Evening came, and still silence. Finally, Elijah stepped forward. "Come here to me." The people moved closer. Elijah rebuilt the ruined altar of the Lord with 12 stones. He arranged the wood, prepared the bull, and laid it on the altar. Then he did something unexpected. Fill 4 large jars with water. Pour it on the offering and on the wood. They obeyed. Do it again. Do it a 3rd time. The altar was completely saturated. Water ran down and filled the trench around it. It was impossible now. Elijah lifted his hands toward heaven. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you are God and that you are turning their hearts back again." The words fell into silence, and then fire from the sky. A pillar of flame descended with a roar, striking the altar with such force that the ground shook. The fire consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, even the water in the trench. The heat drove the crowd back. The light was blinding. When the fire subsided, nothing remained but scorched earth and ash. The people fell on their faces, crying out, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Elisha's voice cut through the chaos. "Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let anyone escape." They were taken to the Kishon Valley and executed. Then Elijah turned to Ahab. "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel and prayed. Within moments, the sky grew dark. Black clouds rolled in. Thunder cracked. Lightning split the sky. And then, the rain fell. A deluge. The people stood in it, faces upward, weeping as water poured down for the first time in 3 years. But when Queen Jezebel heard what had happened, she sent a message to Elijah. "By this time tomorrow, you will be dead." And for the first time, Elijah ran. He fled into the wilderness, traveling south beyond Israel's borders, walking until he collapsed beneath a solitary tree. "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life." He fell asleep, and an angel touched him. "Get up and eat." Beside him was bread and water. He ate, then slept again. The angel returned. "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." Strengthened by food that seemed to come from heaven itself, Elijah traveled 40 days and 40 nights through the wilderness. He did not hunt for food or search for water. The sustenance from that divine meal carried him, just as the angel had promised, giving him strength beyond what any natural food could provide. He walked until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God, the same place where Moses had met the Lord centuries before, where the tablets of the covenant had been given, where God's presence had once descended in cloud and fire and thunder. In a cave, Elijah sought shelter from the elements and from his own despair. And there, in the darkness, God spoke. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The question was not accusatory. It was an invitation to honesty, to vulnerability, to pour out the truth that had been weighing on his soul. Elijah's response came in a flood. "I have been very zealous for you, Lord, the God of hosts. But the Israelites have rejected your covenant. They have torn down your altars. They have put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left. And now they are trying to kill me too." Every word carried the weight of his loneliness, his exhaustion, his sense of utter failure. He had given everything for God, sacrificed comfort and safety, stood alone against kings and queens. And for what?
Israel was still corrupt. Jezebel still reigned. The people still wavered between two masters. What had it all been for? God's response was simple but profound. Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. A violent wind tore through the peaks, shattering rocks, but God was not in the wind. An earthquake shook the ground, but God was not in the earthquake. Fire blazed across the mountain, but God was not in the fire. Then a whisper, gentle, quiet, unmistakable. God spoke again. Go back, anoint Elisha as your successor, and know this, I reserve 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed to Baal. 7,000. Elijah was not alone. He found Elisha plowing a field and threw his mantle over him. Elisha understood immediately, left everything, and followed. Years passed after that encounter on Horeb. Elijah and Elisha traveled together throughout Israel, teacher and student, master and apprentice. The younger prophet learned at the feet of the master, watching miracles, witnessing confrontations with power, absorbing not just the techniques but the heart behind them. Then one day, Elijah knew. He did not know how he knew. There was no voice from heaven, no angel appearing with a message. Just certainty, a deep, unshakable knowing that his time on earth was ending, that his mission, whatever it truly was, had been completed. They were in Gilgal when Elijah turned to Elisha and said, "Stay here. The Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha refused without hesitation. "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." The words were firm, final. He had made his choice years ago, and he would not waver now. At Bethel, the company of prophets there approached Elisha privately. "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" Elisha's jaw tightened. "Yes, I know. So be quiet." At Jericho, the same pattern repeated. Elijah tried to leave Elisha behind. Elisha refused. The prophets whispered their warnings. Elisha silenced them. Finally, they reached the Jordan River. The water flowed strong, swollen with recent rains. There was no ford, no bridge, no easy way across. Elijah took off his mantle, the rough cloak that had become the symbol of his prophetic calling, worn and weathered from decades of use, and rolled it up. Then he struck the water. The river parted, not gradually, but instantly, the water dividing to left and right, as if an invisible hand had cut a path through it. The riverbed was dry and firm. They crossed together, walls of water standing on either side. When they reached the other shore, Elijah stopped and turned to face his student, his friend, his successor. "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha did not hesitate. He had thought about this moment, prepared for it, knowing that whatever he asked now would define the rest of his life. "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." It was the request of a firstborn son, the inheritance of the one who would carry on the legacy. Elijah's expression softened with something like sadness. "You have asked a difficult thing. Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. But if not, it will not be." They walked together in silence, neither knowing exactly when the moment would come, but both feeling it approaching. And then the sky darkened, not with storm clouds, but with something else entirely. The air thickened. A sound like distant thunder began to build, growing louder with each passing second. The wind picked up, swirling around them in patterns that defied nature itself. Elisha's heart pounded. This was it. Suddenly, they appeared. horses. But not earthly horses. These were creatures of fire and light, their manes blazing like the sun, their hooves striking the air itself, leaving trails of flame in their wake. They pulled a chariot that seemed to be made of pure fire, its wheels spinning with tongues of flame, its frame glowing white-hot. The chariot descended, positioning itself between Elijah and Elisha, separating them. Elisha tried to move closer, but the heat was too intense. He had to shield his face with his arm, squinting through the blinding light. And then Elijah began to rise, not walking into the chariot, simply ascending, as if gravity itself had released its hold on him. His feet lifted off the ground. His cloak billowed in the supernatural wind. The fire surrounded him, not burning him but enveloping him in glory, transforming him from a man of earth into something more. Elisha watched, tears streaming down his face from the intensity of the light and the weight of what he was witnessing. My father, he cried out, his voice breaking. The chariots and horsemen of Israel. It was a title of honor, a recognition that Elijah had been Israel's true defense. Not their armies, not their walls, but this one man and his connection to the living God. Elijah looked down at Elisha one final time and smiled. It was a smile of peace, of completion, of a race well run and a mission accomplished. And then he was gone. The chariot ascended higher, higher, until it was nothing but a point of light against the sky, and then even that vanished, swallowed by the heavens themselves. Elisha stood alone in the silence that followed, his arm still raised, his mouth still open in a cry that had no more voice behind it. Slowly, he lowered his arm and looked down. And there, lying on the ground where Elijah had stood, was the mantle. It had fallen from the prophet's shoulders as he ascended, left behind as a final gift, a final commission. Elisha picked it up with trembling hands, held it to his chest for a moment, letting the grief wash over him. And then he stood. He turned back toward the Jordan, took the mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water. Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah? The water parted, just as it had for Elijah. The Spirit had passed, the mantle had been received, the work would continue. But something else had happened too. A door had been opened, a precedent had been set. Elijah had not died. He had been taken, translated, ascended. It was unprecedented, and it raised a question that would echo through the centuries. If God could do this for Elijah, what else was possible? Because Elijah was not the first being to move between heaven and earth. He was simply the first human to be taken up alive. But there were others who had made the journey in the opposite direction. Long before Elijah, long before Moses, long before Noah, there was a time when beings of immense power descended from the realm above. They were called the Watchers. 200 of them came down to Mount Carmel and made an oath. They looked upon the daughters of men and found them beautiful. They took them as wives, and from those unions, something was born that should never have existed. The Nephilim, giants, mighty men of old. But the sanitized versions do not tell the whole truth. They were not just large humans. They were hybrid beings, part divine, part mortal, all corruption. They towered like trees among grass. Their appetites were insatiable. Their violence was legendary. Genesis mentions them briefly. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. Also afterward. After what? After the flood that was meant to destroy them, the Nephilim returned. Their bloodline survived. Og, king of Bashan, whose bed was 13 feet long. Goliath of Gath,
standing over 9 feet tall. The sons of Anak, who made the Israelite spies feel like grasshoppers. All descendants, all remnants, all echoes of that forbidden union. And here is what connects to Elijah. The same power that allowed heavenly beings to descend and corrupt humanity. The same force that broke the boundary between spiritual and physical realms is the same power that carried Elijah up. Fire from heaven, chariots of flame, the movement between realms, it is all connected. The watchers descended in rebellion. Elijah ascended in righteousness. Same power, opposite purposes, deep in the forbidden texts. The books hidden away because they revealed too much. There are prophecies that speak of a time when the Nephilim will return, not as giants, but as a bloodline, hidden, diluted, but still carrying that ancient, corrupted power in their veins. The book of Enoch says the spirits of the Nephilim became demons, restless, wandering, seeking bodies to inhabit, hungering to return, and they are waiting for the seals to be broken, waiting for the boundaries to weaken. Elijah's ascension proved something the powers of darkness did not want proven, that the barrier between heaven and earth can be crossed, that mortality can be transcended. If a righteous man can ascend, can the fallen descend again? Can the ancient pact be renewed? Can the Nephilim return? Every culture remembers. The Sumerians wrote about the Anunnaki, beings who came from the sky. The Greeks wrote about the Titans, divine beings who rebelled. The Norse wrote about the Jotun, giants who waged war against the gods. Every civilization has these stories, because they are not myths, they are memories. The Bible says Noah was perfect in his generations, not morally perfect, genetically pure, untainted by the bloodline of the Nephilim. That is why he was chosen. But the flood did not end it. The giants returned in Canaan. David fought Goliath and his brothers. The corruption persisted. And if it persisted then, where is it now? Elijah's ascension was not just about him. It was a sign of what is to come, a preview, a warning. If the righteous can be taken up, the fallen can return. And the ancient war between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, between pure humanity and corrupted bloodlines, that war is not over. It has simply been hidden, buried beneath layers of history and myth and forgotten knowledge. But it is about to be unearthed. The Nephilim left more than just stories. They left a legacy, a bloodline, ancient secrets, forbidden knowledge. Who built the megalithic structures that predate recorded civilization? What really happened to the civilizations that vanished overnight? Why do ancient texts from around the world describe the same beings, the same events? What were the giants? Where did they go? And most importantly, are they coming back? The fire that carried Elijah into heaven, the same fire that fell on Mount Carmel, is connected to something older than Israel, older than Abraham, older than the flood. It is the fire of judgment, the fire of separation, the fire that divides the holy from the profane, the pure from the corrupted, the human from the other. As we stand now in these latter days, with genetic manipulation advancing at unprecedented rates, with artificial intelligence promising to transcend human limitations, we must ask ourselves, are we walking the same path the Watchers walked? Are we crossing boundaries meant to remain closed? Are we creating new Nephilim? The answers lie buried in the ancient texts, in the forbidden books, in the stories that were suppressed because they revealed too much. Elijah ascended in fire. The Nephilim descended in lust. One was holy, one was corruption, but both proved the same thing. The barrier between heaven and earth can be crossed, and the question is not if it will be crossed again, but when and by whom, and to what end. The legacy of the Nephilim is not dead. It is sleeping, waiting, hidden in bloodlines that have survived millennia. And now, it is time to uncover what has been concealed, to expose what has been hidden, to reveal the forbidden bloodline and the ancient secrets that have shaped human history from the shadows. Nephilim's legacy, the forbidden bloodline and ancient secrets. Before the flood, they walked the earth. After the flood, they returned. And their story is far from over. It begins where Elijah's journey ends, in the fire between heaven and earth, in the boundary between the divine and the damned, in the war that has raged since the beginning and will rage until the end.